Hello friends, welcome back. What were we discussing? Do you remember? Yes, the boy who drew cats. Have you read the part that we have completed? Very good. So, from the part that we completed, we have learned that the story, the boy who drew cats, is talking about a story of a boy, a little boy, who is a youngest child of a farmer, and he seems to be quite not fit for the hard work. But the boy was very cleverer than all his brothers and sisters. And one day, his parents took him to the priest. Why did the parents took the boy to the priest? Yes, the people of the village said that the boy could never grow very big. And the father and mother, the farmer, thought that it would be better for him to become a priest than to become a farmer. That's why the farmer took the boy to the priest. Then the priest, without any doubt, by hearing the answers, the clever answers of his questions, without any doubt, without any hesitation, the old priest, allowed the boy to as his acolyte. And you know what is acolyte means? Acolyte means, yes, the apprentice or the person who is assisting a priest. Okay. Then the boy was very obedient and he learned very quickly what the priest taught him. But the boy had one fault. What was that fault of that boy? Yes, the boy drew cats during the study hours, and the boy drew cats on the pillars of the temple, on the screens, on the walls, and even he drew cats on the margins of the priest's book. That is what the fault of the boy. Okay. Then one day, the priest said severely to the boy that he had to go away from the temple. And before he left the temple, the priest gave him an advice. What was that advice? Yes. Avoid large places at night. Keep to small, was the advice of the priest to the boy. But the boy didn't understand. The boy didn't understand what that advice means. But he left the temple very sorrowfully. Right? Okay. Then he knew that if he go to the house, directly to the house, the father will punish him. The father may thought that he disobedient to the priest. Then he will punish this boy. Then he decided to go to the next village where there was a very big temple. And he thought the priests in that temple would allow him to take him as their acolyte. And that's why he made up in his mind to go to the next village to the temple. But there was a problem. There was a problem according to that temple. What was that? Yes. The temple had been closed up because of a goblin rat. The goblin rat had frightened away all the priests and had taken the possession of that temple. That is what the problem. But the boy did not know about this goblin, the presence of goblin in that temple. That's what we discussed in the last class, right? Okay. And are you ready to listen the rest part of the story? Okay, here we go. When he got to the village, it was already dark, and all the people were in bed. But he saw the big temple on a hill at the other end of the principal street, and he saw there was a light in the temple. People who tell the story say the goblin used to make that light in order to tempt lonely travelers to ask for shelter. The boy went at once to the temple and knocked. There was no sound inside. He knocked and knocked again, but still nobody came. At last he pushed gently at the door and was quite glad to find that it had not been fastened. So he went in and saw a lamp burning, but no priest. He thought some priest would be sure to come very soon, and he sat down and waited. Then he noticed that everything in the temple was grey with dust and thickly spun over with cobwebs. So he thought to himself that the priest would certainly like to have an acolyte to keep the place clean. He wondered why they had allowed everything to get so dusty. What most pleased him, however, were some big white screens good to paint cats upon. Though he was tired, he looked at once for a writing box and found one, and ground some ink and began to paint cats. He painted a great many cats upon the screens, and then he began to feel very sleepy. He was just on the point of lying down to sleep beside one of the screens when he suddenly remembered the words, "Avoid large places, keep too small." The temple was very large. He was all alone. And as he thought of these words, though he could not quite understand them, he began to feel for the first time a little afraid. And he resolved to look for a small place in which to sleep. He found a little cabinet with a sliding door and went into it and shut himself up. Then he lay down and fell fast asleep. Very late in the night, he was awakened by a most terrible noise, a noise of fighting and screaming. It was so dreadful that he was afraid even to look through a chink of the little cabinet. He lay very still, holding his breath for fright. The light that had been in the temple went out, but the awful sounds continued and became more awful, and all the temple shook. After a long time silence came, but the boy was still afraid to move. He did not move until the light of the morning sun shone into the cabinet through the chinks of the little door. Then he got out of his hiding place very cautiously and looked about. The first thing he saw was that all the floor of the temple was covered with blood. And then he saw lying dead in the middle of it an enormous monstrous rat, a goblin rat, bigger than a cow. But who or what could have killed it? There was no man or other creatures to be seen. Suddenly the boy observed that the mouths of all the cats he had drawn the night before were red and wet with blood. Then he knew that the goblin had been killed by the cats which he had drawn. And then also for the first time he understood why the wise old priest had said to him, "Avoid large places at night, keep too small." Afterward, the boy became a very famous artist. Some of the cats which he drew are still shown to travelers in Japan. I hope all of you have listened to this story very carefully, haven't you? Have you underlined the unfamiliar words in your textbook? Very good. Okay. So, I'm going to ask you a few questions from the part that we have just completed to check whether you have understood or not. So, we know that the boy reached at the next village where the big temple was situated. And when he reached there, it was night and all the villagers were in their bed. That means there were nobody to tell him about the goblin. Then what will happen? Let's see. So, my first question. Why did the goblin used to make that light in the temple? We learned that the goblin used to make a light in the temple. Why did the goblin used to make that light? Yes, in order to tempt lonely travelers to ask for shelter. Tempt means attract. So the goblin made that make that light in the temple to attract the lonely travelers to ask for shelter. Okay. The boy knocked the door of the temple and realized that nobody is inside. Nobody is there in the temple. Then he went it. Then my second question. What did he see there? What did he see inside of the temple when he entered? Yes, he saw a lamp burning but no priest. A lamp burning but no priest. My next question. Why did the boy think himself that the priest would certainly like to have an acolyte? Why did the boy think himself that the priest would certainly like to have an acolyte? Why did the boy think like? Yes. When the boy went into the temple, he noticed that everything in the temple was grey with dust and thickly spun over with cobwebs. So he thought that the priest would certainly like to have an acolyte to keep the place clean. When the boy went inside, he noticed everything is dusty and filled with the cobwebs. That's why he thought that the priest would certainly like to have an acolyte to clean all that things, to remove the cobwebs, just like that. Okay. Then he noticed some big screens inside the temple and he found a writing box, and as usual, if this boy noticed, or if the boy noticed any place to draw cats, what will he do? Yes, sure, he drew cats. That is what he done in that temple. That is what he did in the temple. He drew cats, a great many cats upon the screens, and then he began to feel very sleepy. After he drew some big cats on the screens, he felt very sleepy. Then I think you remember the advice of the priest. Do you remember that advice? Keep it in your mind. I'm going to ask you. Okay, my question. Why did he choose a small place to sleep? Why did the boy choose a small place to sleep? What may be the reason? Yes. He remembered the words of the priest. The priest had advised him to avoid large places at night and keep to small places. So he chose a small place to sleep even though he did not know the meaning of the advice, or the meaning of that advice. I think you remember that, don't you? Yes. When he left the temple, the priest had given an advice to this boy. Avoid large places and keep to small. At that moment he did not know what that means, and now itself he did not know what he meant by that advice. Anyway, he selected a small place to sleep after he drew some cats. My next question. Where did the boy find a safe place to sleep on? Where did the boy find a safe place to sleep on? Where did he find it? Yes. He found a little cabinet with a sliding door and got into it and shut himself up. He found a cabinet to sleep, a small place. Okay. My next question. How was the boy awakened? How was the boy awakened? After the boy drew some cats on the big screens, he felt very sleepy and he selected a cabin to sleep. But he was awakened. How was the boy awakened? Yes. He was awakened by a most terrible noise. A noise of fighting and screaming. He heard a sound of a noise of fighting and screaming, and he was awakened. Then, my next question. What was the dreadful voice that the boy heard? What was that dreadful voice that the boy heard? Yes, the dreadful voice might have been the result of the fighting and the screaming between the cats and the goblin rats. The cats. What cats? Which are the cats? Yes, the cats which the boy drew on the screens, on the big screens, fight with that goblin rat, and that was the dreadful voice, the fight between the rats, the goblin rat and the cats. Okay, my next question. How do you think the goblin rat was killed? The goblin rat was killed, and how do you think the goblin rat was killed? Yes, the goblin rat was killed by the cats which the boy had drawn. The goblin rat was killed by the cats which the boy had drawn. Okay. My last question. What was the advice of the priest helpful to the boy? Why? Was the advice of the priest helpful to the boy? Why? And what was that advice? Yes. Avoid large place and keep to small. And was that advice helpful to the boy? Yes. Because of the advice, the boy chose a small place to sleep, and which saved his life from the goblin. If the boy had slept inside of the temple or the entrance of the temple, the goblin rat would have killed that boy. But the boy obeyed the advice of the priest, and he chose a small cabinet to sleep. That's why he was not seen by the goblin rat, and that saved his life from the goblin rat. So the advice of the priest is helpful to the boy. Okay, so the boy's skill to draw the cats, what others considered as his fault, saved his life from the goblin rat. That is what we learned in the story, right? Okay. Do you think the picture of a cat can kill a goblin rat? No, but it is possible in stories. Everything is possible in stories, right? Okay. And we know that the boy who drew cats is a Japanese folktale. And in Japan, cats are revered for giving good luck and other positive results. Good luck and other positive results. So by this video, we completed the second lesson of your English course book, The Boy Who Drew Cats, a Japanese folktale. And I will be back with another video lesson. Till then, goodbye.